Ms. Wilson, do we have confirmation of notice to the media?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And I do declare we have a quorum with all board members present. We'll just need a motion to approve our agenda.
So moved. Second.
Mr. Patterson, Mr. Garner, any questions? All those in favor of approving the agenda, raise your hand. That's unanimous. Okay, we'll move forward with the general fund budget discussion.
Good afternoon. At this time, I would like to just turn it over to Mr. Lawless and to lead that discussion. We do have a guest, and Mr. Lawless is going to introduce our guest, who's going to give us some additional information as it relates to things that we need to know regarding impact fees.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
I think all of you are aware, I know most of you are aware, that the topic has come up of investigating the possibility or whether it would be in the interest of this district to pursue a development impact fee. That is certainly something that no one at the district has expertise in because we've never investigated it before. And there's a lot of legalities that are involved in the process before you would really determine whether it was in the best interest of the district or not. Rather than to go on what we think, we decided to bring in someone who knew a little bit about it. So we have Mr. Theo DeBose with us. You may know Mr. DeBose. He is our counsel for our bond issue. We've got years of experience with dealing with him on other matters. But he had done a presentation that I saw online regarding impact fees, and so we just wanted to bring him in here so he could explain the process, pros and cons, and determine whether it's something that the board probably ought to take into account. I'll just turn it over to him and let him give his presentation.
Thank you, Jim. Great to be back with you. Jim has handed out the copy of the presentation I made at the School Association 7 years ago. Been a little development experience since then, but not a whole lot. That was about an hour-long presentation. I guarantee you, it's not going to be that long. I want to get 5 points for you, and I'll skip over a lot of this. First of all, impact fees are another way of paying government expenses. They develop in jurisdictions and closer to Florida being one of California, where people that have been there a long time, and the people who come pay for them. Live in the community 30 years, pay taxes, and all of a sudden, there's school every 10 years, usually that is really focuses mind customary Florida's hospital construction impact fees. South Carolina adopted its impact fee statute in 2011. And there have been, I would call it, impact fees across the state. Since then, it's a complicated process, and it's really happened in those areas. For the most part, we have a high level. Town of Fort Mill, maybe the tax is not years ago. Fort Mill School District grew to a county that is maybe 15 staff in front of you, additions to the department, and some impact fees philosophically draw opposition for facilities that are of a long period of use. Schools, for example, might be used for 30 or 40 years, and yet school students only use a particular school for 4 or 5 years, and elementary, middle school, or high school, they're using the facility won't be more than 5 years. So there are questions about whether impact fees should pay for the entire school when the people paying for that don't ever get to use it for its entire useful life. I think the quick answer to that is that you'll never be able to collect enough impact fees to fully pay the cost of something like a school. It would so increase the price of the house that nobody would buy it.
Mr. DeBose, do you mind pulling the mic a little bit closer to you? With that air
Sure, is
kicked
that
on,
better?
we can't. Yes, thank
Is
you.
that better?
Thank
Okay.
you.
But as I was saying, while impact fees have this, some people think they're not equitable because you have people who only use the facilities for a couple of years paying the cost of it. The fact of the matter is that a school building will never be built fully with impact. It would raise the cost of that building too high in any type of program in South Carolina. You would have to have the school only occupied by new growth. The impact fee would have to be on for 4 years. Not gonna do it. Interestingly, although they're the most expensive facilities, except for some water and sewer plants the government does in South Carolina, schools weren't in the original impact fee act. It took another 8 years for those to get in. And I don't know why that is. You want to make growth pay for growth. School facilities are governmental level. Nonetheless, they got put in there that the school impact fee follows the same format and legal requirements as any other impact fee. And impact fees start with a capital improvement plan, like a copy of one. This is not something that school districts is qualified. I've never represented a school district that's qualified to develop this study on its own. It requires some mathematical and demographic expertise that no school district in South Carolina has, no jurisdiction in South Carolina. And in fact, the Act requires it to be prepared by an experienced department. But this particular corporation, or particular funds out of Maryland, has, I'm aware they did this in Lancaster, they did Fort Mill School District, I think they did this too. And then there are a couple of other companies also provide the services. And I don't want to go through this thing. There's a lot of math. The purpose of this study, when all is said and done, is to figure out the per unit cost, or per purposes of school and residential unit cost of a school, and then allocate that cost on projected new housing for a stated period of time. Impact fees, you see, are not the purpose of maintenance. Impact fees are to meet growth or new capacity in the schools. So if you've got 2 500-room subdivisions coming, and you know that your existing schools are at full capacity, you don't have a place to put those new students, that's an example of Fort Mill School District has 3,500 new students every year. That's a pretty good place to move the place. And they are building, having 3 new schools. They include impact fees as part of it. Those impact fees end up being only about 25% of the cost of the facilities. People who are new to the area and bringing new children in, creating demand for new facilities, are getting some skin in the game that way in a manner different than all of the taxpayers in the area. The study is going to figure out, deduce, what is your capacity now, what are your capacity needs, projected future period, typically 5 to 10 years. They're going to examine what the cost of those facilities might be, and then allocate the cost of those facilities on a per housing basis. For example, you'll see in here, a 4-bedroom house doesn't necessarily have 3 children. They dig deep and look at the particular product that's being taken. In the Fort Mill study, they deduced that there would be 4 or 5 students, high school students, in the housing. Once that cost is spread across all new housing development for the school, then the toughest question comes, is that number, if you're trying to build a new high school and you're trying to put it on 1,000 new students, that's a lot of money. You can't do it. And so there comes a political process when you decide, well, how much should the numbers justify X? What number somewhere below X should we use? And that's not a mathematical process. It's really a political process. Your home builders. Yes, sir.
You said the impact fee would be against all of the housing or just in development?
Well, that's down the road, that's to be determined.
Okay, so it's not fixed.
It's not, it will be fixed by the time you're through the process. Fort Mill, for example, their single-family impact fee is over $18,000. When I did this presentation a couple of years before that, I suggested $5,000 was a lot of money. Now, Fort Mill is unusual. Those are high-dollar homes to most of those people who would have otherwise built in Charlotte, coming to a better school district, and a slightly lower tax. But another district in York County could have justified the same type of school district cost with the school district cost in a given county. That district, because there were smaller homes being built, opted for a much smaller and I think this language suggests that. At the end of the day, you're still going to need additional source of funds to build that school. And said in Fort Mill, I think the expected. It's not a cure-all. It doesn't take away all of it. So, Mr. Varner, to your question, Fort Mill and Lancaster are actually at opposite ends of the spectrum about how you oppose it. Fort Mill is a very compact school district. You can walk across it in a day. Lancaster School District is about 46 single-family development, and they're dealing with fire, law enforcement. They have a water and sewer district like y'all do in the rural areas here. They have it within the county. And they have had explosive growth. So when Lancaster County, in the past 2 years working through this, they couldn't act like Fort Mill and operate on the notion of child of the town of Kershaw who was assigned to these Indian 4 years ago. That worked. So Lancaster creates a special area where impact fees will be not imposed on. They're imposed on a defined service area, a school, or anything else. These impact fees are designated will be built in that defined service area. And only the development in the defined service area will pay the impact. So, but they're all in, I think. Some new buildings are going to pay for fire service. Probably just about anything. With all buildings need fire service. Only residences are going to pay for schools. It's commercial and industrial, and everybody will pay school. But the key is they defined an area where this growth required new facilities is located and is projected limits impact to be there. If you live 20 miles away from city lines, to build a new house, you don't get this. Our law in South Carolina, in terms of application, is pretty new. And we don't have any sense, because no court has considered it, how big that area can be. What anybody in government has to do. But you got a fairly large district too. Unless somebody put in something real big, I hadn't heard about it, figured it out late. Probably not going to put an impact on it. That's this study is intended to do, and they justify or designate it as process for impact. Even though school districts have been added to the list of permitted buildings, school districts themselves don't have the authority to impose the impact fee. That remains with county councils and municipal councils. So in your case, you would work with county council, where the county council has to be willing to undertake a study, then kick it over to their planning commission, which is a body required by something. They have another facilities. So you would be intimately involved in that process. I think if it was done correctly, you would be intimately involved in the discussion about, at the end of the day, how much fee should be. Because the numbers will justify a lot bigger numbers, a lot bigger fee. I think this process can be done start to finish in 6 to 9 months. It really does start with county council giving you a nod and then you engaging, I think, with the consent of the council, this consulting group, one or the other, to come up with this study. Is it worth that investment? Well, if you are just looking at renovating schools to deal with your capital maintenance, and you're not looking at adding classrooms either by expansion or by new facilities, no, it's probably not worth your time. But if you've got 500 new students coming in a couple of years that you've got to deal with, then that's worth looking at. In terms of how much and in terms of whether you do it is all going to be in those kind of details. And these high growth areas, either at the top of Lancaster County or throughout the Fort Mill School District. And Clover has looked at it too, just because they've got a lot of growth coming over the border from Charlotte, Mecklenburg County. In those areas, it's definitely worth it. And there are people who are in the business of projecting how much residential growth you will have in a given area in 5 years. Just looking at land acquisition trends and where growth is happening today, they will project where it's going to be in the next 5 years. And if they project that kind of growth, then it's worth that kind of exercise. There, again, a lot in the details, but I think from 5,000 feet, that's how it works. If you're interested in it, it really is getting the involvement and buy-in of county council. They need to know right off the bat, it's no skin off their teeth. I mean, they will make the district pay for that study.
How much does the study normally cost? Ballpark?
I have
No idea.
I have no idea. I would imagine 5 figures somewhere though, but I wouldn't imagine a high 5 figures.
Kind of thinking $30,000 to $50,000
Yeah,
to do a study.
Mid, yeah. I'll be glad to see if I can get somebody to tell me, but let Jim know. And we can also get you names. This isn't the only company that does it. They just happen to have done the school districts of which I'm aware. And but get county council's buy-in. Again, it's no skin off their teeth. It shouldn't cost them anything. Your county attorney has to develop an ordinance, but there are 2 or 3 good examples in South Carolina that county attorney can use now and go forward.
Is there any type of formula used when you have a new development? You said
For-
something about the number of units, like if you had 500 units.
Yeah, well, there's an example in here. Let's go through it. And let me see where it is.
I think it's in the other
How
packet,
about
Ms.
page
Ware.
15?
The other packet. This one.
This PowerPoint copy, Ms. Ware. I simplified it. So let's take a 500 rooftop development. It's all single-family homes. You'll find that multifamily apartments, the suggested fee is usually lower because they're smaller and they assume fewer children. So a 500 rooftop development, assumption of 3.5 occupants. Now this is for fire, not for schools. So you multiply 500 by 3.5 persons per house, and your consultant tells you that it costs $112.97 per person to build a fire station, pricing a new fire station out on how many people it will serve. And that's on the prior page. That comes out to $197,000 and change. And then you allocate that among 500 houses, it's $395. That's for fire service. The school calculation will differ in that you would only estimate the number of students that would be in that new house. And as I mentioned earlier, that seems to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 0.5 students per new house. Why is that? Because people buy houses and don't necessarily have children, aren't going to have children, or their children have already left. So, yeah, so they're, schools can be different. Yeah, this is a little old data. But there's that big number I was telling you about on the next page. And what's really driving that is the cost per pupil. The State Department tells you how big a school has to be, and square footage for each pupil you're going to have, and the number of acres you're going to have for a particular kind of school for each pupil. So you allocate that all on a per pupil basis, and then divide it among the houses. And you'll see in this example, it's $23,000. For most places in the United States, that's just too much money. So you negotiate that down. So, Ms. Ware, did I answer your question?
You did.
What is the cost per person of a facility, and how many people are you spreading it across? And if you're doing fire service, then, you know, at least for 60% of the people in that house, they get to use it as long as the fire station's in business. For schools, it is a little different, because the people that are using the schools go away. They grow up.
Yeah,
So
but
a
they generate
house,
more.
a house might have 4 students in it using the school, but in 10 years, it may have no students using the school. So
And those 4 have 4, and then those 4 each have 4.
if they hang around,
Yeah.
that's right.
That's part of the reason for having schools, is hoping they hang around.
That's right. Good schools, make them hang around. And they'll pay their own impact fee. I don't think you get a pass if mom and dad paid an impact fee. I think when you buy a house, you may have to pay one too. But Ms. Ware, that math is what your consultants are going to do for you.
Is this a study that, I think we're currently doing a facilities review? Is this something that can be added into that?
I do believe so. This is very similar to what we're in the process of doing now, as far as getting that information and looking at the demographics. So I do believe it will be pretty much all-inclusive of the information that we'll need for this.
I talked to Ken Cox this morning. He said the demographic study that we're doing is complete. He's ready to review it. They've done facility assessments in 2 schools, and they've got a schedule of the other. They've been ready for the high school. So I think the demographic part is talking mainly about this.
Yeah, and if a facility study that is telling you what you need to do at District 55 High School, because you last touched it with a major capital improvements plan in 2005, doesn't necessarily fit into this, because it is just maintenance. The key thing that you've got to put in there is showing, here's where the growth is. And we need to build a new school or expand your existing school to handle an increase in your student population.
I feel like that information would be included, since that's
Yep.
really what spurred this to start with, I believe.
Yes, we requested that information to be included.
Okay. Without the benefit of seeing it, it may be great, it may be just something that needs one more module put on it, which is allocating cost across new facilities in an impact fee consistent manner, not in a bonded indebtedness tax millage manner, which are really different things. I do feel constrained, and I need to say that there is litigation pending up in York County over the use of impact fees, as York County York County has taken the position that you can only use impact fees on a pay-as-you-go basis. In other words, you would have to collect the cost of a school before you went and paid for it, that you can't use the impact fees, which you just collect over a period of time. You couldn't use those to pay debt service on bonds. Typically, when you've got growth, you go ahead and build your facilities to meet that growth. And it may be 5 years before your impact fees for those students are collected. So there's a real disjunction there between what the Act's trying to do, which is to meet growth, and the position that that county has taken. That is still in the trial court. I've looked at Lancaster's ordinance, which I wasn't involved in drafting, and Lancaster County Council did not take that position. They made it clear in their ordinance that the school district could issue bonds, and then they could lower millage each year as those impact fees came in. If you really have to do this on a pay-as-you-go basis, that really lessens the utility of the schools, because you don't get to attack the growth for 4, 5, or 6 years. Meanwhile, the people who've been paying the fee, all their kids have graduated from high school, so they paid the fee and never got to use the school. And then, if you've picked up the newspaper the past 2 months, runaway inflation could make these cost figures meaningless if you just let that roll for 3 or 4 years before you actually build the school. So keep that in mind. Tried to get the legislature just to amend the statute just to short circuit litigation, but there seems to be no interest to getting that done in South Carolina right now. Statute lets counties and cities issue bonds, but the county has taken that sort of odd position. We'll see how that gets resolved. Any questions for anybody? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. DeBose.
Always good to be with you, and I think we'll see some of you this summer.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Okay. Well, again, I was off microphone, but I was thanking Mr. DeBose for coming in and speaking with us. I know this was a topic that's been of interest to the board, so we can take the information that he's provided and determine how you would want to move forward. So moving into our discussion of the general fund budget, my primary goal for this session is to come out of the session with the priorities of this board, is to solicit your input more than to provide information. We've collected information from a survey from various stakeholders as well on things that they would like to see. I know that at this point we are still awaiting information out of Columbia on what exactly we will have to spend. The House has a version of the budget that they passed very quickly. The Senate has a version of the budget that they will be debating this week. As it stands right now, those budgets are fairly significantly different, and whereas in years past, when they go to the conference committee, it's usually just kind of a formality. One takes, you you come out of it pretty quickly. Hopefully it is not a telling sign, but the House last week passed a continuing resolution pending. If they were not able to work out the differences between the House and the Senate versions of the budget. Hopefully that will not happen, but I don't think that the sticking points between the two budgets are related to education necessarily. There were some differences in the funding formulas. The Senate version required a much smaller $2,000 increase to the state minimum salary schedule compared with the House version, neither one of which would require a tremendous raise on the part of the school districts that were already paying above the minimum, which we would not be above the minimum as we sit currently, but it's nowhere near $2,000 or $4,000. Like we said at the last board meeting, is $900 some at the starting level. What some other districts around us are trying to do is to do like a percentage raise at each step of the salary scale. My personal preference as far as how to go about doing raises would be to have everyone in the district on the appropriate step of the scale, be it the teachers or non-teachers. I think that goes without saying. And then to determine how much we can increase, be it 3% or another local district's doing somewhere around 2 or 3, they said, percent at each step of the scale. But without knowing the revenue that we'll have coming in, it's hard to really pinpoint that. So hopefully we'll get more information this week as the Senate debates. Hopefully their debate on the budget won't take that long.
And I will say as well that as we have been meeting, looking at budget and doing the budget planning, we have been operating under the lens of trying to figure out, with our priority being catching everyone up to where they should be on the salary schedule. So we have been working hard to put that as a priority and as a focus. So just wanted you all to know that that is definitely a priority of what we've been discussing and what we're planning when we're looking at the budget of trying to make happen. And then as Mr. Lawless said, then we would look at any additional things that we would be able to do once they are actually on the appropriate level on the salary schedule.
Right. It's important that we pay according to the scale, because that's fulfilling a promise to our employees. And then from there, we also have to be competitive with the districts around us. My fear is that this process is going to create a wider variance from district to district than what we see currently, because depending on how this new funding model comes out, some districts will have significantly more means to put into pay raises than others. One district in our Western Piedmont consortium is planning to do only a $500 raise over what they were doing in the prior year. So, it runs the range from one district saying $500, another district saying they're going to try to do $4,000, which, as we went over in our quick math, that's kind of a non-starter for us. Certainly we will fall somewhere in between. If we could, I would think at this point, if we could manage to pull off 3%-ish across the board, plus being on step, with the priority being to be on step in the new budget year. But having said that, do we have? I'm mainly wanting to gain information from you today. So where to begin this? We'll have another budget work session as we actually draft the budget, where we can go over the particulars. But coming out of this today, we need to know where you stand, what you want, what you have as priorities, and how we can change our budget process to best suit our stakeholders, be it the taxpayers and students in District 55.
Well, Jim, I had just printed, I printed this document online and just made some notes on it. And
Which document is that, Ms. Wood?
this one that you provided.
Supplemental.
The supplemental sheet. One of the things we talked about, last year, I know, was making sure if we're not currently utilizing a position and don't intend to, that it is, that line item's cleared out, that we've got that money allocated somewhere else, and it's not just sitting there. And some of the items I still, you know, on the assistant athletic director, we've got a number of 4, but there's only 2 names listed. We've got a dance team with a name listed, and it says it's filled. I didn't even know we had a dance team.
In high school.
You know, so I want to make sure that this document is 100%. And I see that you've gone in and made some highlights and made a couple of notes.
Those
Like
aren't,
you said, social work duties, okay, that's not being used.
That-
Okay,
ma'am.
when can we take that?
those aren't my notes, but
What was that?
those aren't my notes. That's not my document. It's kind of built off of the one from last year, but,
Okay, so who highlighted these and wrote down and said that they were either filled or not filled?
human resources.
Okay, so the social work duties for LDHS says it's not being used. So is that something that's gone by the wayside so we can actually pull that line off the budget and be done with it? Or is that something that we're pending to fill it? I mean, anyone can answer the question.
Well, for us in human resources, I'm sorry, I didn't realize you guys were looking in my direction. But for us in human resources, we receive the information from the budget meeting. For example, we may get a sheet that says, trainer, assistant trainer, video, whatever we may get a sheet from the business office that has all the supplements listed as we have them here. That information okay, is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. For us in human resources, we do get a sheet at the conclusion of the budget, once it's voted on, and oh, there it is. And it tells us the particular supplements, such as video technician, athletic trainer, whatever the case may be. That information is then sent to the principals of the schools. The principals of the schools tell us the people that they want to be in those particular positions. And then we issue the supplemental contract. So what we do is very important on the employee side, because if Jody is going to receive the supplement, we need to make him aware that he's receiving the supplement. He comes in and he signs for that. But as far as the supplemental amounts and if something is used or not used, we're not involved in that part of it. If you guys,
Sure. Well, who can accurately go through this list and confirm if something is being used or not used, and if we have 4 listed but we're only using 2?
We are working with HR and the schools to try to have a better list for the budget this year. In the past, we've had a fairly standardized list of, this is kind of a guideline, a maximum amount to be paid for a certain area. In the past, after this was passed, we've had some reallocations at the school level where they might say, well, I want to pay this one a little less and add a little more here. I've kind of requested that stop because I think that when the board approves the list, that it should be the correct list. So we are soliciting information from the schools this year. If you want to shuffle this deck, give us your information now, not in August when they start their new school year, but we need it now. So we're trying to build that. And most of these positions the vast majority of them are filled and they are recurring. The number may change based on if they add an additional team or there's been some additional positions required via Title IX. national board certification, for instance, will vary depending on how many nationally board certified teachers we're currently employing. We had approved up to 20 in that. Right now, we have 17 or 18 nationally board certified teachers in District 55. I think we were 18 and then one left. So I think we're currently paying those supplements to 17 teachers.
So we have 8 cheerleading coaches. Says there's 4 for football and 4 for basketball.
I don't,
Is this for, 1 for each school? Does that not include the high school? I guess my point is, I asked these same questions last year, and I believe I even asked them the year before that. And this list is still not very user-friendly in how it feeds into the budget. You can't pick up this list and know, oh yeah, we have this, this, and this, because even though it may be on this list, we may not be using it, or we may not be using it this year, or maybe that got transferred to something different. So I would just like a clean list.
and we will have that for you when we get the new budget document.
Now I just want a point of clarification. This is what I believe. For the cheerleaders, that would include some things that happen at the middle school level as well as at the high school level. So that would be more than one complete supplement. You would need at least 8 to have your ones at the high school and also have the middle schools. But
Right.
you are correct. It does not specifically say that.
Yeah. Well, and as an example, let's say a cheer coach at the high school, there's cheer coaches, their cheer squad mostly is the same squad all year long. Now, I do think they have some that may or may not do either football or basketball, but it's mostly the same squad all year long. So do those cheer coaches get paid this supplement? Say they get paid in the fall for the football supplement and in the spring for the basketball supplement, so it's the same person getting 2 supplements?
I believe that's the case. Well, that's right, isn't it, right? Isn't it per season? Or no?
Yes, and we do that with a pay request. What normally happens is at the end of the season, the principal or the athletic director, because we do have ADs at the middle school level, will send a pay request to pay Renee for my job as being the cheerleading coach at the conclusion of the season. Now at the high school, you do have, and I don't know much about the monetary amounts, but at the high school, sometimes you do get into playoff pay and things once you go beyond the regular season, and that is at a different rate. But normally, that $1,200 or $1,000 or whatever it might be for the cheer, they get that at the end of both seasons. So at the conclusion of everything. And I think, Mr. Lawless, the business office did, I think you guys have a rule that you use. If the supplement is at a particular amount, don't you do half mid-year? And
Larger supplements are spread out over the course of the entire year. Smaller supplements are paid out in lump sums. So some of these would be in a single check at the completion of their season, or near the completion of the season.
Would that be in the discrepancy between male head coaches and female head coaches?
There- I believe that Title IX requires that there be the pay be equivalent between the male and the female. Certainly not my area of expertise.
Mr. Lawless, you were talking about the conversations that are still ongoing regarding, bless you, what the numbers are going to look like as far as our budget coming from the state and what that means for teacher pay. You had referenced a number in one of our previous meetings, or maybe Dr. Thomas referenced it, of a $994 difference between our lowest, or our starting pay, and the 40,000, I believe.
Right. That was based on the House. The House said that the House version of the budget was based on a minimum teacher salaries pay of $40,000. And we're at $39,056 currently. The Senate version of the budget did not increase it by $4,000. The Senate version of the budget only increased it by $2,000, which would mean that we would be completely at our option on how much to do for a raise.
Okay.
But yes, that was I believe that was what you were referring to, was the difference between what we currently pay for bachelors and 0 years of experience versus what the House
Right.
said the minimum in South Carolina would be.
And we're currently behind one step. Is that correct?
That's correct. For
Okay.
teachers.
Yes, yes.
For teachers.
For
And-
teachers or for non-certified? I thought it was non-certified was the ones behind.
Non-certified are 2 years behind.
2 years.
Okay.
So what do those different components look like as far as what would it take to get non-certified caught up for their 2 years or even 1 year, and what would it take to get teachers caught up to their 1 year?
In the past, we've estimated $500,000 per step for teachers. That was before some of the bigger raises that they've done in the last few years. So we'd have to do a full calculation. And we're talking, we have over 800 employees, and most of them are on the majority of them are on that teacher scale in one classification or another. So I don't have a firm number on what a step costs us, but if you figure at least $500,000.
What about
likely more.
non-certified to get them caught up one step?
I think to catch them up completely, 2 years is probably about the cost of a single teacher step.
Okay. And how close are we to being able to do that?
It depends on how much revenue they provide.
And in any of the scenarios that they're talking about now, would it allow us to do that?
I think that it is probable that we'll be able to get on step. The question is, how much can we increase the pay at each step? For instance, to get on step at what we pay currently, if the state isn't requiring, it's just for teachers as an example. According to this minimum salary schedule passed that came out of the Senate budget, we would not be required to change our schedule at all. I think that we should, with the additional funding, be able to get everyone on the step that we're on as the scales exist currently. And from there, that's not really where we want to be. We would like to increase the value of each step on each scale. And that is where we will have to maximize the available revenues. So, if we shoot for 3%, the state has said that, I believe that what they're planning for state employees, not in the schools, is a 3% raise over the prior year. So if we did 3%, if we were able to do 3% on the scale, and then also catch them up a step, that would be a really nice raise for a lot of our employees. But again, getting on the correct step would be the first step in that, the first part of the process, and then determining, based on the revenues that are available, how much we could increase from there. Some things will be required to increase. Bus drivers, for instance, they've already, I believe that they've already said they want 5% of the state portion of bus driver salaries to increase. You know, in addition to that, there's some talk as to whether that they are also included in the 3% for being state employees. So I think that there's been some extra attention on bus drivers that may result in each step of the bus driver scale going up 8%. But you know, then that's based on the information that we're hearing, and we don't have final numbers right now.
If I look at, through your survey results here, it seems like the first thing, like you've been saying all along, both of you, get on step. And then I think, looking up, South Carolina inflation rate's running about 7.8% right now. So you give a 3% raise, if that was all they were getting, then they're really getting a reduction, right?
Losing to inflation.
Losing to inflation, yes. Okay.
I think that
that's one way to look at it. So I think our goal should be is to look at what we can do to get them on step, first off. And then give as much, with maybe a target of shooting at that 7% total between the step and that. So,
yeah, well,
I mean, that's if you're asking for a target, there it is, throw a dart at it,
that's an ambitious target.
Aim high or go.
I'm not arguing that that's something that we shouldn't try to do.
Yeah.
I mean, my goal would be to meet the non-personnel needs of the district, and then to maximize what we're paying, especially those of our employees that are on the salary schedule. Teachers have been given, relatively speaking, fairly favorable treatment out of the legislature the last couple of years. We have not really visited a lot of our other schedules, but I would be inclined to increase both as much as possible. And it's just a matter of determining what's available to work with and then working within that framework. As far as, a 3% raise versus a 7% inflation, I think that there's a bit of a tortoise and the hare type of a scenario involved in school district employment. There were years where there was zero inflation and our employees got step increases, and they got 2% raises if they weren't paid on the salary schedule. So, I mean, at the end of the day, I don't know that we're not, if we have a year of negative inflation, I don't hear people talking about trying to reduce salaries to match that. So, I mean, we have to kind of look at it as an average inflation, but I understand what you're getting at, and it would certainly be a goal.
I think they're top two priorities right there. And then
Absolutely.
Maybe the third one, what I see on here, is try to do some capital safety improvements, where they fit. I think we have to have a 10-year plan or whatever and have all that played out.
It would be great if we could all go with the House version, but we don't know what's going to be because the budget hasn't been set yet. That being said, everybody needs a raise, even our cafeteria workers, because it's a shame that they have to even be on benefits when they're not employed here during the summer months. And I know that for a fact that they are. So everybody needs an increase. And I know you feel like it's been favorable toward teachers, and it has. But what about those people who went back to school to become certified teachers? I applaud them as well. And if people want to do that, the opportunity avails itself because our district offers that through Lander, USC, I think, South Carolina State, different colleges and universities that are nearby, or either online on their own. So those are good points right there for people to do that if they want to. Not everybody wants to. So that's all, up to them, the individual. But I would like to see more of the budget because I always have a concern about the grass at all the schools, and it's hard to get one company to do everything because you can't get it. You know, I always talk about, cleaning, because I said in the summer months when the buildings are being cleaned by, with not having the kids in there and being cleaned by our services, how can they still charge the same amount of money each month? And I know we've had this discussion because we would say that the person still orders the supplies and all that, but the students are not necessarily always in the schools the entire summer. So I still have problems with that. And I always want it out for bid again because I think we can still get somebody to do it, at a cheaper rate because we don't pay the insurance. And that's the part that the person who bids on it do. He does pay that insurance, but I've always had problems with that. And sometimes you can't get one company to do everything, so you have to look at several of them. And the lowest one is not always the best one, and the highest one is not always the best one, so.
Do all of our employees have the option to be paid just during the school year or cover it over the 12 months like the cafeteria? Or can they choose to receive their pay over a full 12-month period, or is it only during the time that they're actually here?
It's so minimum, it still wouldn't add up. I'm telling you the truth.
I believe you.
It's
I'm just
it's very minimum.
curious.
If you don't, and it's only because I worked at
Yeah.
DSS and I know it's very minimum.
Oh, I
It
believe
wouldn't-
you. I'm just so curious
it
if
wouldn't.
everyone has that option or not.
I believe for the cafeteria workers, they, supplement the summertime with the
Summer feeding program, but not everybody does that. Sometimes they may feel like it's not worth it, and it is to me, but, not necessarily to somebody else.
You are
So-
correct. The managers and the cashiers are paid year-round, and benefits, everything is included. But as far as the workers, it is an hourly rate, so you do get paid for the work that you do. And we do have summer meals, but sometimes summer meals does not require the entire staff. And sometimes we don't have enough people to staff that because they do feel that in the summer they may get other employment to supplement.
One other thing I want to toss out there regarding just the budget in general is I really think we need to look at ways that we can combine positions at various levels in order to tighten our budget up a little bit. Maybe if we've got two positions and maybe if we've got two positions, but neither employee are being very efficient, can that be one position? I just think we need to look at all opportunities to save money within the district as we move forward. So.
And we are definitely, as we're looking at going through the budget planning process, we're looking at, and we've actually asked our school administrators as well to look at areas where they may be able to shave back or to cut as well. So we are looking at that process and looking at our needs and how we are using all of our resources as well as we move through this process. So hopefully through that, we will be able to determine some of those things that we could identify as areas that we may be able to do some innovative things with.
Even things like, I'm curious, so if we're using a cleaning company throughout the summer, would it be beneficial for our janitors to come in? Or are these cleaning companies doing something special that our janitors can't do?
We utilize the contract services throughout the year as well. So we don't just bring them in necessarily for the summer.
Okay.
But they do things as far as like cleaning, waxing the floor, those type things. But our custodians do work during the summer.
Okay.
And I'm not sure now if we have contract services at all of our schools currently, Dr. Harris, during the summer. So there are specific schools.
Yeah. And that's to strip the floors, our staff.
The only company outside of what we use on a regular basis is actually with our foreman. When we lose somebody, we have to fill a gap. We have to get rid of somebody to fill a gap. And that's where we use that company, send somebody to help us out. And we use them a lot during COVID. We had lost some people. It's just really difficult to find people who will lose custodial work and a little bit of money that they make. I can work with that. It's not easy
Right.
for us, and it's not easy for that company to keep people on their payroll either. So we use that mostly as a gap filler. And when we find somebody good, we try to bring them on to work for us. Not to let them do that.
So we just, the board just got a copy of this as we sat down today. What have been, Dr. Thomas, Dr. Penland, Mr. Lawless, what are your takeaways as the biggest concerns that individuals put on the survey to discuss today?
Basically, just reiterating what we have already stated as far as catching up on the salary schedule. That was echoed throughout the survey quite a bit. And pay raises was also another issue as well. And safety, which has been something that we've definitely been discussing and have been just talking about and soliciting feedback for as well. So safety was another issue that was echoed throughout the survey as well. So those were the three major topics. And there was some facilities maintaining or just really trying to renovate some of our facilities as well. That was something that was kind of a common thread throughout the survey. But most of it was focused on being actually paid on the salary schedule, receiving raises, being competitive with other districts, and safety were the top three.
Which school wants a new playground? Or I know this was just one person's comment, but I'm just curious if you know which school.
Probably
it came
most,
from.
probably most of them. Lawrence Elementary,
Elementary schools.
EB, Morris probably, but.
Gotcha, thank you.
There
I didn't know if they still chose their school or their person
No,
or
not
whatever.
for this
Okay,
one.
there was a couple that actually listed what school they were speaking.
gotcha.
Playground equipment is very expensive, so schools often find it very difficult to replace those items unless there's some really good fundraisers or PTAs involved with that process.
And is that
Another-
only up to the individual school based on the budget that you've provided them to do playground equipment?
We do have meetings with the principals, and so during those capital needs meetings with Dr. Harris and Mr. Lawless, they can definitely let us know, and we can look and see if there's some things in place, especially if it becomes like a safety concern as well. But most of the schools do take it upon themselves to do some type of fundraising efforts, or I know that some schools have had some things donated as well, funds donated for that, to get the new playground equipment. Another thing that was mentioned a few times was also just dealing with like mental health and discipline, socio-emotional learning, just continuing to provide that support for our students and for staff. So that is also something that we have discussed and we're looking at as we're reviewing and planning as well.
How did the program that you're using for the social emotional learning this year, is that a program that the district had to pay for,
Yeah.
the videos and that we're getting?
We did pay for the curriculum as far as for the guides for the teachers. We did purchase that for teachers.
Is that a program that can be used over and over again?
Yes.
Like the videos that they have? Okay. Do you want to talk about Ester Funds, or does anyone have any more questions about what Mr. Lawless has talked about or this survey? Dr. Finland, do you?
Sure. I gave you a kind of a cover sheet that described our 3 different pots of ESSER funds. First one was SC Cares. We were allocated $1.6 million. We have a remaining about $18,000. I have submitted an amendment to the state for kind of getting that out of all those little small budget pieces. And then some of the expenses that Dr. Harris was mentioning earlier, of some of those cleaning contracted services that we had to kind of increase throughout the year for COVID reasons. We'll go back and reclaim that, and that money will come back to the general fund based on where we had originally done that. So we'll be able to claim that backwards. ESSER 2, we had $6.9 million, remaining $2.7. Those funds do go through the end of, September of 2023. So we still have another year and several months to spend those. Some of those are allocated through salaries that were like 3-year salaries. So we've already used year 1, we're using year 2, so we still have year 3 budgeted. You'll see in there, we also have kind of a big chunk for after school, summer school. So some of that's going to be probably not used, so we'll be able to shift those around and put those in areas that we see that come up that we need to focus on too. I did request to see if either ESSER would allow for safety and the purchase of metal detectors. That was denied. So I think some people are shifting money in and out to pick up something on the general fund, to pick up metal detectors on general and putting the arrows in the ESSER. So we're looked at some ways to possibly do that too. ESSER 3 is the ARP, the American Recovery Plan, $15.5 million, remaining $13.1. But remember, that is through 2024, so that is some monies that we just started. They do highly recommend that you first in, first out. So those monies that we received in first, we utilize those and then kind of save the the other pot that will last a few more years. So on the other 2 pages, you basically have ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 salary lines, what we had budgeted and what's remaining. If it's in that other column, it's encumbered, so we have not actually received the invoice yet. And I listed them by buckets. So those are the categories that we had to apply those with. And so if you have any other questions on any of those areas, and I'm about to submit some more amendments on that as we kind of look to see if those positions that we didn't fill at the very beginning of the year that we waited 4 or 5 months to fill, those salary amounts and chunks can be moved out to other areas. So working on kind of actual salaries versus budgeted to be able to work on an amendment.
And during our budget planning meetings, we have tried to really have a laser focus on looking at opportunities to be able to free up the funds in the general fund budget. And so that's something that we've been discussing as ways of things that we've done. We've looked at our enrollment and how it's still not where we want it to be, and so we're able to claim some salaries through that process. So we are continuously doing that, and Dr. Pimlin is submitting amendments as we see the need to make adjustments to the ESSER funds as it may have a positive impact for our general fund and for the needs of the district.
For example, the first, we budgeted 1 year of lost revenue based on enrollment, and so that was about $500,000. So since we were down, I think we kind of estimated about 200 students. We did 200 times the kind of base student cost, looked to see what that would cost us, since we didn't go through and cut teachers based on having, if we had 20 less first graders, we didn't go through and say, okay, we got to cut this teacher. You know, we kind of kept those teachers and kind of shifted those students around as we kind of felt like we needed to, versus just going out there and just axing positions. So since our enrollment kind of changed just a little bit, so I think we'd still be eligible to reclaim some of that money again. So that's part of the amendment that I'm going to apply for, to see if they'll approve it for year 2.
Can you, are you all able to pinpoint exactly where you're using our students, what area?
It's not, whenever I've done some looking, we did lose a lot 2 years ago to like online virtual programs. Even though we had our own, they either went to some private schools because they wanted a full 5-day in person that we were not providing at the very beginning because we were hybrid and stuff like that. But we have recaptured some of those. Some went homeschooling only because they wanted that protection of just their home, and then some went virtual to be able to kind of also provide that homeschool. But you know, when we started, we ended up with 1,600 kids in our own virtual academy. So I think we were able to kind of capture and keep a lot of our kids up front whenever we implemented that. So I really don't know that there's a single pocket that those are disappearing from. You know, whenever we look at our senior class right now, that's around roughly 300. At the end of December, it was probably closer to 350, 360. But now we're down closer to 300 because some of those have already graduated in that December graduation. But our largest class right now is 520 in one of our grades. So there are some grades that go down to 400, some are 520. So it's not necessarily a specific pocket. And whenever I look at school enrollment, it's not that one school has lost a lot. They're all pretty much down basically proportionately. So it's not a, let me pinpoint the area that I can find.
Do we have any plans to fund the virtual program in the fall?
We actually do not see as much interest in having the virtual program. We are looking at that on a case-by-case basis, and so we will not need as much funding as we have needed previously in order to fund that, because we will not have as many students. However, we will still look at that on a case-by-case basis to be able to accommodate those needs when necessary.
And I think we can provide a lot of that through SC Virtual with our, especially middle school and high schoolers. If they kind of choose that early enough in the year, we can still have them on our roll, but enroll them through SC Virtual. And so they're still with us, with our counselors, but enrolled in those courses. The elementary, you know, we have, I think, total right now, not even 80 to 90 kids total in our virtual program. So, and we have a little bit of carryover that we'll be able to provide for those special cases, that if we see somebody that's medically unable to come, that we can utilize some of those.
Are those
spots.
80, are they in a pocket anywhere, or is that just kind of evenly spread?
I haven't seen that list lately.
I was just curious.
I think it was just kind of fairly evenly spread throughout K through 12.
And then the last question that I have is not in particular to the Ester Funds, but just in general. How are we, as far as classroom size and the teachers that we should have in place, as far as the quantity of teachers that we should have in place, you know, are we fully staffed? Where are we falling short?
Who's going to take that one?
So
I can tell
as
you a
far as
process.
this current school year, you know, we're considered fully staffed. There may have been some situations to where, you know, we may have had some long-term subs that we had to utilize. So as far as, I guess, making sure I understand your specific question, do we have enough teachers to cover the number of students? Is that what you're asking, or?
Well, yes, and a little bit more specific. You know, we had, and I think we've talked about this before, but, you know, we had a situation at the high school last semester where there were 3 classes in one classroom under one teacher at the same time during the same hour-and-a-half class period. And to me, that does not seem effective. So, you know, why is that happening? Are we, you know, do we not have another teacher that can be split into 2 classrooms? Like, why are we having to pile 3 classes into under one teacher?
Sometimes that's due to the request load. Either is that we have a lot that's asking for this section, so we need to have multiple sections with it. But also sometimes it's that we have several classes that are being requested, but you might have 5 or 6 want this one, 5 or 6 want this one, and you know, so versus having a section of only 6 or 5, we kind of try to pair a couple of classes. You know, that sometimes the curriculum or the content's very similar, it might just be accelerated. For example, 2 in welding, we do 3s and 4s together because some of those are work-based and some of those are level 3s. So on a teacher's schedule, it appears that he has 2 sections at the same time, but he's also doing some of that monitoring of going out and monitoring the work-based kids, or kind of placing them out in the industry, but they're still in his role. I think the one that you're talking about, some of those were CNAs, kind of one of the medical health occupation classes. So whenever you're looking at that, that's kind of looking at that content. Sometimes we have offered like a biology honors along with the biology 101, you know, so that it's kind of the same content, but somebody might not be taking it for dual credit, they just want it for honors credit. So there's a little bit different kind of requirements, but it's kind of the same content that they kind of just assign different things. So we try not to do that a lot, but a lot of times that's based on that, okay, we're not going to be able to offer biomedical because we only have 6, but it's a lot of the same content that you'll be taking in the CNA, so we kind of combine those classes so that we can still offer both. But once you get to 3, that really does kind of start a scheduling nightmare and probably a headache for the teacher, but we do some pairing if the content's fairly close.
Okay. So with that being said, for example, at the high school, will we be able to, you know, if someone wants honors or AP, will we be able to pair those even if you only have 2 or 3 people sign up for the AP class?
If the content is fairly close, we try to do that. You know, our AP sections have to be in the spring because that's when the exams are given. So sometimes we do a honors in the fall, and then that kind of feeds into AP in the spring. Sometimes they're kind of taught together, and the kids can choose if they're going to take the exam or take the honors credit. So we do that based on enrollment. All that's done through IGPs. You know, we're still in the middle of IGP process, changing and updating schedules. So those numbers of requests kind of change based on everybody that's walking in and out of that building. But it pretty much stays pretty close based on, we had 30 kids request this section, so we need 2 sections. I mean, this course, so we need 2 sections. So all that's done based on course requests and course through IGPs.
So based on what you're saying, as long as they're combined properly, we don't need an extra teacher.
Right. So we're trying to save.
Situation.
We're trying to save one from either, you know, not having an additional teacher, or second, just saying no. Even though I have 5 people that want AP biology, I'm not going to offer it because I only have 5.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it's either cut out the request or the course offering, or you kind of combine those that work.
Okay. And just one last question. I heard just a couple of days ago that we were starting, you know, we've been starting Algebra 1 even as early as for some 6th graders several years ago, and that we're probably not going to do that anymore. Is that a budget issue? Why are we choosing to not do that?
Dr. Harris, do you mind speaking to that?
That becomes more from the source of teachers and their would go in anyway because they passed. Now they struggle a little bit with that, and maybe they passed that as well. And now we're into geometry as an 8th grader and really not ready. So what the teachers were telling us was that we were not, because they're missing 6th grade math, fundamental stuff, 7th grade math, 8th grade math, that they really were not ready for what was coming at the high school. So we think, based on the recommendation of the teachers, that cutting out that 6th grade group, still having 3 algebra and 7, algebra and 8, English 1 and 8, will be enough for these students to still be able to get some credits. But the geometry thing was stretching it a little bit, and we had a lot of kids who were ending up there at high school, and Ms. Johnson was telling us they're just not ready. Now, a few of them would be, but a lot of them were not. So we thought it was a service to kids, really, in the long run, not to have that at this point. And when it came about, that program actually started for the benefit of one student who we were trying to keep from going, we were not leaving. He was trying to be kept from going to Greenville County to get in a similar program, but I don't think it was well thought out at the beginning. And so we went back and really went with the recommendation of teachers as to what was. Our math people seem to think that's the best move, just to look.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
And just something to add to that, we also kind of felt that this year was a good year with all the learning loss, that you probably would have them less likely to be ready as incoming 6th graders for pre-algebra. So we just kind of felt like it was the right time.
So we'll have 2 years, we'll have one more group of 7th graders with algebra, and we'll have 2 more groups that will do geometry at high school, and then we'll phase out.
And we've also had conversations, as I've met with Dr. Penland and with Teaching and Learning Department, that we definitely continue to look at individual students and individual needs. So if there happens to be a case where there's a student that really needs to be pushed and move forward because they are obviously ready for something, then we will definitely see what we can do to make that a possibility for those students. So we're still looking at trying to personalize that and providing and accommodating the needs for students as we continue with this process of making decisions of what's best for the students.
And that was one of my concerns too, whenever you're looking at those that should be in that geometry route, should be probably part of your top 10, but then they're making B's and C's in geometry honors. And so that's really hurting their 4-year GPA that, is going to be hard to recover from when they're typically 95 to 100s on everything they take. So.
Thank you. I appreciate that explanation. We are past our 5:30 mark, but I want to make sure that any board members that want to ask any questions or discuss anything, or if you guys from the district have anything else you want to share.
The American Rescue Plan, how did it go when you submitted it? Did they say it was promising, or?
Sure.
I know they had a meeting or something about
Yes,
going.
the 4.5-hour meeting that whenever we had to go and kind of present our plan, started at 5:30, and I left about 10 minutes after 10 to 15 minutes after 10. I was 29th on the kind of docket of the to kind of present, because they were in order of our request of how much we requested.
But are we willing to take any amount?
We are willing to take whatever they give us.
Okay.
The programs that we're focused on are going to be continuing to expand the EMT program, starting the firefighter, and also kind of beefing up and kind of updating our equipment for our health sciences is the program that we submitted. So the feedback that I got that night was very promising, felt good, but whenever you sit there and listen to 28 others before you talking about feeding kids that are hungry, talking about the battered moms, and you hear a lot of need in our community. So I know we have a lot of need, but I know there's all the families and kind of the baggage and the experiences that our kids come from. They also have a lot of need in the different areas that support our kids. So if we get anything, that'll be a win for our kids, but I know all the money will be spent well. So.
Okay. Thank you. Are we all set? Everybody good? All right, if we would, in order to close our meeting, we do need a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Patterson. Any questions? All those in favor of adjourning, raise your hand. It's unanimous. We are adjourned.